This is The Professionals, a podcast by music business technology and broadcast media technology students on Outcast OCCR Owens Community College Radio. In this series, students will interview industry professionals in their respective fields to help gather an idea of what it's like to work in their industry.
Hello, my name is Cardin. I'm a broadcast media technology student here at Owens Community College, and I'm here interviewing Jeff Smith from WTO 11, who is an evening news anchor. Thank you, Jeff, for sitting down for an interview with me.
Glad to be here.
So, Jeff, tell me, what brought you into the world of news and media?
Boy, I was in 7th grade, and here in Toledo, this is where I grew up, and I was at Christ the King Elementary School, which I don't know if you know the Toledo area at all, but right at Monroe and Sylvania, where those intersect, there's a street called Harvest. And I remember vividly, like it was yesterday, we didn't have a lunchroom for our classes. So we used to eat our lunch in our class.
Okay.
The day specific was in January of 1986. And we had a TV monitor. We used to watch Price is Right during our lunch. And we had the TV on because that morning there was a space shuttle launch. And it was the first time ever that a teacher was going on the launch. And it was the Space Shuttle Challenger. The teacher was Krista McAuliffe. I don't know if you remember or not, but in 1986, that was the Challenger explosion.
Yeah.
When it took off 73 seconds, I think, into the flight, it exploded. I immediately got up from class. We were in an upstairs classroom. I ran down the stairs to the teacher's lounge when there used to be a teacher's lounge and just banging on the door, making sure, sorry for the audio there, hopefully that didn't throw things off, but I remember rapping on the door, trying to get the teacher's attention to tell them what had just happened and they needed. So that was kind of, I look back at that moment to think, you know what, I wanted to be the first one to tell people about what just happened in the news. And that's kind of that curiosity, that fascination, that desire, that drive, I guess, that I noticed then. I was always somebody who wanted to get up and be the presenter in class. I never had a problem with public speaking. So it just kind of drew me into that world. And my internship when I was in college, I did at 13 ABC, where I worked for 21 years. And it was during the O.J. Simpson trial. That was every day there was something different. So that was exciting for me. It just kind of drew me in more and more and more and got me excited about the industry.
Who are some of your biggest inspirations in news and media that inspired your journey?
You'd probably have to look back to some of the names, the famous names of, nightly news past, Peter Jennings, Walter Cronkite, Tom Brokaw, those individuals who you kind of looked at and thought, wow, that's the way you do it. That's Brokaw especially. And what always drew me into it was not only their work being that front person on the anchor desk, but also going out and reporting, being on the scene. And that's something I really, really am drawn to and really appreciate the ability to still do that in my everyday job.
All right. What are some of the good changes in news and media that you have observed, along with what are some of the challenges you have observed?
I think that can be answered in one fell swoop with just saying the internet has created this dynamic by which print media has been forced into more video, more of a broadcast side of things, and broadcast has been forced into a more newspaper, magazine type style. So it's a blessing, and I don't want to call it a curse. I just, like you said, it's a challenge. It's a new challenge.
Yeah.
So I think the dynamic that exists for both of where you used to have this division, because I remember when I was in school, there were a number of different, I guess, areas you could specialize. You could go radio, you could go print, you could go broadcast, you could go magazine. Now all those dynamics are doing a little bit of each other's job. It's more, in fact, Indiana University, where I went to school, there used to be a journalism school. There is no longer. It is now a media school.
Ah.
That's what it's called because it kind of encapsulates everything, right?
Yeah. Do you have any favorite moments or memories in your broadcast career that you can talk about?
I worked my first job in northern Michigan for News Channel 7 and 4, which was the NBC affiliate out of Traverse City. But I lived in Gaylord, Michigan. So I'll do the little hand thing for you. Not good for the radio audience, but podcast audience, but the little hand thing that everybody does with Michigan. And Gaylord's about right here, about 50 minutes from the Mackinac Bridge.
Okay.
My coverage area was basically the entire lower northern half, if you will. That's what they call it, of Michigan. I was covering areas like Petoskey, Michigan. I was covering all the way up to Sault Ste. Marie, which is in the Upper Peninsula and is right there on the Canadian border. So I had this 500 square mile coverage area as a bureau reporter. And I remember at that time, we didn't have drone technology. So any overhead shots that we got, if there was a search for like missing snowmobilers or missing, hikers, you had to get in a little plane and go film from the air. You didn't have drones. So that was one of the more exciting, exhilarating, and frightening things that I had to do was take all of my gear up in a little Cessna. And I didn't fly it by no means. But as a passenger, I would hang my camera out the window and shoot video of the landscape. And that was probably one of those things that will always stick with me because I hate heights. So that was one of the things, but I had to do it for the job. We also did stories about Mackinac Island, and we would have to get video of that during the wintertime. The only way you got aerial shots was by being in the air. It wasn't by drones because those didn't exist. So those are some of the things that I'll look back on and say, wow, that was quite an experience.
Can you give us a breakdown in the day in the life of a news anchor from start to finish?
I worked for 20 plus years doing morning news. So I was up at 2 a.m. My shift went until about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. At that time, it was a matter of trying to ingest everything that happened overnight and even the things that were happening while you were there in the newsroom. Since that time, I am coming up on 3 years at WTOL in December, and I'm working polar opposite shift now. I'm working where I was working 2 a.m. till 1 p.m. Now I'm getting at work at about 2:30 p.m. and working till midnight. So once you get in, even before you get in, I think that I'm glad you asked this question because this is one of the things that we talk to some of the newer reporters, people getting into the industry about, is the fortunate, unfortunate part of this job is that it starts before you ever step foot into the car to go to work. It's going from the time you get up in the morning because you're always trying to cultivate stories. You're always trying to cultivate ideas with your contacts, those people who you've developed a relationship, right?
Yeah. And
that's one of the things that is frustrating, is challenging, is exhausting for this industry, but it's necessary. It is the life and blood of what we do because you have to get leads on stories. One of my favorite things to kind of draw on when we get into the news discussions, we have a meeting every day at 3:00 where we come together, everybody pools together their ideas, talks about things that we know are going, press release kind of stuff that we receive. This event's happening here. This event's happening at this time. But I like people coming to the table with a lead and a love. And what I mean by that is bring a story idea that can lead a newscast, something that's got a little meat to it, but then bring a love as well, something you would love to cover. And that's sometimes more of the softer news, right? Things that could be a little bit lower in the show. But throughout the course of the day, it's familiarizing yourself with scripts, familiarizing yourself with stories, making phone calls round the clock. I also do a community affairs show. In fact, I'm taping one tonight that airs on Sunday. It's called Leading Edge. And we bring in people for longer format like this, longer format interviews where you're not just getting that 30-second soundbite. You're allowing people to talk a little bit more about the things you want to know about.
Yeah.
Things that are going on in their life.
What advice do you have for somebody who wants to be in the industry of news and media?
Be ready to work. Be ready to be exhausted. But I think that goes with anything you do, any job you get into. It's not just for this industry. However, it is frustrating at times. You don't always get people who want to go on camera. You don't always get people who want to give you, quote unquote, the story. I think one of the most important things is being open-minded and understanding that the biggest thing, we had a situation this past week where we were doing a story about the changes in education here in the state of Ohio. And we ran a story this week where it was very one-sided. It had everybody who was against the changes the state wanted to implement. So the next day this week, we went out and got those who were in favor of it, just to be balanced. But that's the part of this. Because of social media, because of the use of Instagram, Facebook, everybody on Twitter, a lot of opinion has been inflected into, or injected, if you will, into reporting. Just people have become their own little journalist, but a lot of opinion is in there, and that's what we try to steer clear of every single day. We don't want anybody to think we're going one way or the other on a story. We want to be as balanced as we can be in what we tell them.
What would you say are the ingredients that make a great newscast?
Emotion, passion. I tell people when I interview them, I say, I always appreciate passion and purpose, right? People who lead by example, people who show initiative. And I think when you get a lot of those elements in a newscast, I think that's my most enjoyment of the day is that 3:00 meeting, or there's also one we do in the morning at 9:30 where I just appreciate, and I'll go back to this word, the cultivation of ideas. When people are making those phone calls, they are paying attention, they're looking into stories that they can develop, they can localize, things that might be happening around the country that, hey, maybe I can make this work here in Northwest Ohio or Southeast Michigan, right?
Yeah.
What's the biggest story going on right now from an economic standpoint in Northwest Ohio?
The
UAW strike, right?
Yeah.
The UAW is on strike. One of the first plants to go on strike in the nation was Toledo Jeep. Just with that story alone, the fact that the UAW is striking against GM, Ford, Stellantis, just because that's going on, you can look at so many different elements. Today is 21 days into the strike. So it's been going on for 21 days. There are people who are out surrounding the Stellantis plant in North Toledo with signs. They're not working. They have stood up and they've said, we're not going to work until we get a better contract. And every single day we are trying to, what can we tell today? How can we tell it? And we look to other markets around the country, other TV markets, see how they're doing it. But we also have to kind of cultivate our own story ideas. Last night we did one where we were finding out some of those strikers are getting second jobs. They're applying for second jobs now because they're getting $500 a week strike pay. That's all they're getting. Every 2 weeks they get a check, but they get paid $500 a week. So that's a big cut in the family budget. So there are a lot of elements to that. We go out, we talk to restaurants. You're not seeing business, right? The business is being cut. Grocery stores. We went to a meat market. One of the first stories we did, a meat market where people go and buy hamburger, they buy steaks, they buy pork chops, right? And the butcher at that meat market told us, I'm going to see a lot of my people, my customers who come in here who buy steak are going to start buying hamburger. That's a telltale for the economy, right?
Yeah.
That's a real change. That's a real punch to the gut.
What would you say are some of the major responsibilities that would have to be followed?
For whom?
Anchors or people that go out to record.
One of the most important things is being culturally aware and being civic-minded. So what's happening in your town? You have to be plugged in. You have to be a student of what's around you. And what I mean by culturally being aware is no street names, no places, no people, no places, no things. No matter where you go. I was lucky enough to get a job back in my hometown. But for anybody that gets into this business that goes somewhere else, be a student of where you live. And I'll say it again, plug in. Just make sure that you are aware, you are educated about your area. Because you never know. You could be in front of a TV camera, you could be on the radio doing traffic reports. And you want to know how to say street names, and you want to be sure that you can point out landmarks when you're pointing people to go someplace.
Yeah.
What did you tell me here today when I walked into those double doors? You gave me a landmark. You talked about the Fine Arts Building, right? So you're aware of Owens Community College and the campus, and you could probably direct me around here pretty well.
Yeah.
You're a student of OCC. But expand that out miles and miles and miles and miles away from here so that you can tell people how to get around Northwood. You can send them to the corner of Summit and Cherry where our TV station is located. And you can say, oh, that's where WTOL is.
All right. Well, Jeff, once again, I want to thank you very much for allowing me to interview you today for the Industry Professionals Podcast.
Thank you.
This is Connor with my guest, Jeff Smith from WTO11, and this is the Industry Professionals Podcast on Outcast OCCR Owens Community College Radio.
This has been the Professionals Podcast by Music Business Technology and Broadcast Media Technology students. Join us next time on Outcast OCCR Owens Community College Radio.